Hello LEGO fans! Over the last couple of months, we've covered a lot of ground. The GBC Standard, input hoppers, spacers, and several iterations of the S-curve lifter. Basically, all the pieces we would need to put a GBC module together. So why has it taken me so long to get to this point? Because, back in December, after posting episode 6, I had sent the link to my father-in-law. After watching it, he sent me an email to tell me that he liked the video, but then he added this. How about building something with two balls moving in opposite directions, so that the tracks would cross and the balls would just miss one another or maybe not? Just a wild thought. Yeah, no. Legos run inherently vertically or horizontally. There's no way to do the 45-degree turns. And the only pieces that I have for corners are 90 degrees. But then it occurred to me that if I rotated the entire base by 45 degrees, the quarter-turn curve pieces would align exactly the way that I need them. So what pieces do I have to work with? I've got 8x16 plates, 8x8 plates, and there's an 8x8 wedge plate that could be useful. I've got the 4x4 corner brick, and then two different sizes of facet bricks. Let's rotate them by 45 degrees and see what we can do with them. We'll start with the large rectangular plates and offset them from each other. Next, add a bunch of square plates to balance it. Then, fill in the gaps with the wedge plates. Now I have a rectangle with studs oriented at 45 degrees. Now I can create the two tracks with straight bricks laid out at right angles to each other. I'll use 2x2 round bricks for the insides of the turns, and then 4x4 corner bricks for the outsides of the turns. Finally, I can use the facet bricks to create the entry and exit to each track. I'll fill in one track with blue tiles to give the balls a smooth rolling surface. I'll fill the other track in with yellow tiles, so it's obvious that I have two distinct tracks. Where they cross each other, I'll use green tiles, because blue and yellow together make green. Get it? And now I have two crisscrossing tracks. I'll also need a splitter to distribute the balls alternately to each track. But splitters are pretty common and not that hard to do. Finally, I'll need a pair of spacers that are synchronized to spit out the balls with a slight offset in timing. For that, I decided to use my butterfly wheel spacer, but with two of them linked through a differential gear. That mechanism looks like this. The input power comes in through this shaft here. This leads to a gear that will connect via chain to the first spacer wheel. The input shaft also provides power to this shaft here, which then runs through the differential. The far side of the differential is tied to a gear that is effectively locked in place with a friction pin. Under normal conditions, it won't move, but I can turn it forward or backward to adjust the synchronization between the two spacers. I'll come back to that in a minute. With the output shaft locked in place, the outer gear will rotate at half the speed of the input shaft. So that means I need to go through a 2-to-1 gear set to compensate. That's these two gears right here. The outside of the differential is a 28-tooth gear, so I can drive another 28-tooth gear here, and now I have a drive gear for the second spacer in line with the first one and rotating at the same speed. You can see that these two gears both have a blue pin to mark the 0 point on each gear. As I rotate the input shaft, you can see that the two pins are not aligned with each other, but their position relative to each other remains constant, at least until I rotate this gear over here. Rotate it in one direction, and the blue pin on the second gear advances, getting closer to the pin on the other gear. Rotate in the other direction, and they get farther apart. This should let me fine-tune the timing between the two spacers to try to get the balls to go down the two tracks without colliding with each other. Finally, I also rebuilt my input hopper. The original design had a sweeper bar in the middle, with angled walls on either side of the exit. Unfortunately, this allowed the sweeper to catch balls and drive them directly down the chute, causing them to jam or overload the spacer, and that's bad. My new design is asymmetric. I moved the sweeper off to the left and replace the angled wall with curved bricks that match the path of the sweeper. This means that any force from the sweep will go across the opening rather than down into it. The right side has sloped tiles on it. That should dump anything on the right side over to the left. The input hopper also got wider by 4 studs, giving it more capacity. So far, this new design seems to be a definite improvement over the original. Well, that's it for part 1. In part 2, we'll take a look at the completed build.